All right, ready to dive in. We've got a ton of cool stuff to cover today.
Definitely.
So we're doing a deep dive into evolution,
Love it.
using all those excerpts you pulled from that zoov102.pdf.
Oh, yeah, the university biology course.
Right. It's going to be like,
Super cool.
yeah, like we're back in college.
Yeah, without the test, though.
Exactly. No exams for us.
Thank goodness.
But seriously, though, these excerpts are amazing. There's so much to unpack.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild ride.
Oh, it is. It is. We're going to go like way back in time, starting with those early ideas about how life changes, even before Darwin.
Oh, yeah, before Darwin was even born.
I know. You've got some notes on Lamarck in there, right?
I do.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think how people were already trying to wrap their heads around these big questions. Like,
I know.
how does life change over time? Lamarck's idea of transformism, like
Transformism. Oh, yeah.
that species have separate origins but can change
But can change.
over time.
That was pretty radical for the early 1800s.
Totally right.
It really was ahead of his time.
Yeah, way ahead of his time.
Oh, yeah. And his focus on acquired characteristics, like,
Oh, yeah, that one's fun to think about.
I know, like if a giraffe stretches its neck to reach leaves, then it's babies.
It'll pass it on, longer necks.
Exactly. It's a simple idea,
Super intuitive, but
but not quite how it works.
right, not quite how it works. It turns out
Genetics is more complicated.
much more complicated.
Way more complicated than that. But it's still interesting how those early ideas,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Even if they weren't spot on.
even if they were wrong.
Yeah, they still shaped the path toward a better understanding of evolution.
Totally. They paved the way for Darwin and all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you can't talk about Lamarck without mentioning Cuvier.
Oh, Cuvier, right. He was like the anti-Lamarck.
Totally opposite view.
I know. Looking back at their work together,
Like you can feel the scientific tension.
I know, it was like a battle of the titans.
Yeah, like a clash of ideas.
Total clash of ideas. Cuvier was all about fixed species.
Fixed and unchanging.
Right, and that extinctions just wiped the slate clean.
Like hitting the reset button.
I know. A much more static view of life.
Oh, yeah. The total opposite of Lamarck's dynamic.
Right, like ever-changing species.
Exactly. And their debate fixed versus changing species.
That was a key stepping stone towards Darwin.
Oh, yeah. Darwin's big breakthrough.
I know Darwin. So that brings us to Darwin's epic voyage on the Beagle.
That journey changed everything.
Changed everything, especially his time in the Galapagos.
The Galapagos. Talk about an evolutionary wonderland.
It's like evolution central. Each island with its own unique species.
I know, it's incredible.
I know, right? And Darwin was super struck by the finches.
Oh, the famous Galapagos finches.
Right. Different beaks on each island.
Perfectly adapted to the food.
It's like nature was showing off its evolutionary skills.
Like, look what I could do.
I know. So that was a major aha moment for Darwin.
Absolutely. He realized all those finches.
Had to come from a common ancestor.
Exactly. They must have diversified over time, adapting to those different islands.
It's like evolution was running its own experiments in the Galapagos.
Like a giant natural laboratory.
Right. But Darwin didn't just observe, he was making connections.
Connecting the dots, I like
They're
it.
like, remember Thomas Malthus? He wrote about,
Population growth?
right, and the struggle for existence?
That was a huge influence on Darwin.
It was. Malthus argued that populations
Can grow like crazy.
exponentially, right? But they're always limited by...
Resources,
Yeah.
food, space, all that.
Right. So there's always competition.
Always a struggle to survive.
And that sparked Darwin's thinking about,
About survival of the fittest.
exactly, those who are best suited.
They thrive and pass on their genes,
It's like a cosmic game of musical chairs.
with survival as the prize.
Right. And Darwin wasn't alone in this realization.
Oh, yeah, remember Alfred Russel Wallace?
And Wallace.
He came up with basically the same theory.
I know. It's like the idea of natural
It
selection.
was in the air. Multiple brilliant minds.
I know, converging on the same idea.
Amazing. And it makes you wonder, how many other groundbreaking ideas,
Or out there waiting to be discovered.
right, just waiting for the right people to connect the dots.
I know. But even with two brilliant minds on board, Darwin's theory,
It was controversial.
super controversial.
It challenged the prevailing views about life,
I know. Especially those rooted in religious beliefs.
challenging the idea of divine creation.
That was a huge deal. It's like Darwin threw a grenade into the world of science and religion.
A metaphorical grenade.
I know, right? But beyond the religious objections,
There were also scientific challenges to his theory.
right, like Darwin didn't have all the answers.
Like, how did these variations actually get passed down?
Yeah, like how did inheritance work exactly?
That was the big missing piece of the puzzle.
I know. So enter August Weismann.
Weismann. His germ cell theory was huge.
It was a game changer.
He showed that only changes in the germ cells
The sperm and egg,
could be passed on.
which totally debunked Lamarck's idea.
Right. Acquired characteristics couldn't be inherited.
It's like Weizmann was like, nope, sorry, Lamarck, that's not how it works.
That's not how genetics rule.
I know. Weizmann's work was crucial because it established that distinction.
Between somatic cells and germ cells.
It was a major breakthrough in understanding inheritance.
It was. But even then, there were still debates about the nature of inheritance.
Right, because around that same time, Mendel's work on inheritance
Oh, yeah. Mendel and his pea plants.
was rediscovered. It was like, wait, what? We missed this.
Exactly. His experiments showed,
That traits are passed down
in discrete units,
in discrete units, which we now call.
genes,
But even with Mendel's work, there was still a lot of debate.
different schools of thought battling it out.
I know, it was like genetics is trying to find its footing.
Yeah, with those big questions about,
I know, about the nature of inheritance. Like, was it about those big, sudden changes?
yeah, those macromutation,
And those tiny, gradual ones.
like continuous variations.
Right. So many different ideas. It's fascinating how science.
It's rarely a straight line to the truth.
I know, it's messy.
It's a winding road.
Winding road. It's full of detours and debates.
Absolutely. A lot of uncertainty.
But eventually it leads to
More refined understanding.
a more refined understanding, and it's through those debates and disagreements that we get closer to the truth.
Exactly. And R.A. Fisher, he really helped reconcile those seemingly opposing views,
Right. Fisher was a genius.
showing how Mendelian genetics could explain those continuous variations.
That was huge.
It was. And that led to neo-Darwinism, or as we call it now,
The modern synthesis.
the modern synthesis.
And that modern synthesis was a real turning point in evolutionary thought.
It brought everything together.
It did. It brought Darwin's natural selection, Mendelian genetics, and a much better understanding of mutation and variation.
It created this unified, powerful framework.
Powerful framework for understanding evolution. And at the heart of all this,
This is the concept of descent with modification.
right, descent with modification. It's like the cornerstone of evolution.
The idea that species change over time, accumulating all those tiny heritable variations.
And we see evidence of this everywhere we look. From the smallest genetic tweaks,
To the grand sweep of life's history.
it's truly remarkable. And that's what I love about evolution, you know?
What's that?
It's not just some theory in a textbook.
Oh, it's much more than that.
It's happening all around us.
Constantly.
Constantly. We see it in the news.
In our backyards.
In those excerpts you pulled, it's happening everywhere.
Evolution in action.
Evolution in action. And one of the most dramatic examples is,
Drug resistance in HIV.
oh, the HIV example. That's scary.
Yeah, the excerpts mention that 3TC drug.
Right, the one that looked promising initially.
But then, boom,
Yeah,
resistance popped up.
out of
It
nowhere.
happened incredibly quickly.
Incredibly quickly, within weeks.
It's a stark reminder of evolution's power.
I know, it's both fascinating and terrifying,
It is. It shows how evolution can sometimes work against us.
especially in those infectious diseases.
Especially in infectious diseases, yeah.
Okay, but hold on a sec. How can a virus like HIV
Evolve so quickly.
evolve so quickly? We usually think of evolution as this slow process.
It usually is a slow, gradual process.
Right, taking millions of years.
But HIV, it's different.
It's on fast forward.
Exactly. A few things speed things up.
Like what?
Well, HIV has an incredibly high mutation rate.
So its genetic code is constantly changing.
Constantly changing, yeah.
And those mutations create variations.
And some of those variations.
Might just happen to be resistant to a drug.
It's like a genetic lottery.
So then when you introduce the drug,
It acts as a selective pressure,
it wipes out the non-resistant viruses.
leaving only the resistant ones behind.
And because HIV replicates so quickly,
Those resistant strains become dominant.
in a matter of weeks, it's survival of the fittest, but on a microscopic level.
Playing out right in front of our eyes.
And we're trying to keep up.
A constant battle.
It's like an evolutionary arms race.
It is. We develop new drugs. HIV evolves new resistance.
And the cycle continues.
It's a reminder that we can't underestimate the power of evolution.
No, we can't. But it's not all doom and gloom.
Absolutely not. There are so many positive examples of adaptation in nature.
I know. It's not all about killer viruses.
Right. Think about the peppered moth.
The peppered moth, classic example.
Textbook case of natural selection.
Tell me about it again. I love this example.
So, before the Industrial Revolution,
The light-colored moths were perfectly camouflaged.
blending right in with the lichen on the trees,
But then pollution darkened the trees.
With all that soot from factories,
It was like the environment flipped the script on camouflage.
suddenly being dark was the key to survival.
And the darker moths.
They had the advantage.
I know, it's incredible